Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Teen Summit 2025. I'm so happy to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Josh Galarza. Longtime Montessori educator Josh Galarza writes fiction and creative nonfiction and is a multidisciplinary visual artist specializing in printmaking and book arts. His research centers male gender performance, queer issues, body liberation, and Chicagoan issues. His debut novel, The Great Cool Ranch Dorito in the Sky, for the record, Cool Ranch Doritos are the only Doritos that matter, was a finalist for the 2024 National Book Award for Young People's Literature and the winner of the Amelia Elizabeth Walden Award for Excellence in Young Adult Literature. It was also on the Teen Choice Book Award list for Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Vermont. Connecticut's going to pull it together, I promise you. His next young adult novel, False Face, is forthcoming from Henry Holt Company. Galarza holds an MFA in creative writing from Virginia Commonwealth University, where he taught creative writing, and a BA in English and a BFA in art from the University of Nevada, Reno, where he taught printmaking. He's currently on faculty in the Creative Writing and Literature for Educators MA program in Fairleigh Dickinson University. Maybe that's how that's said. And he lives in Northern Nevada. Thank you so much. I am going to stop sharing so that you can.
Okay. Wow. Thank you for that super kind introduction. Um, let's, oh, sharing is not turned on. Send request.
I got that.
Okay,
Something was
let's
going to
try.
happen.
Yeah, this is the scariest part, honestly. If we can get through this, everything's going to be just fine. Okay, come on. All right, perfect. And you're seeing my PowerPoint, correct?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. Um, Okay, I can take a breath now that the hard part is over. Um, yeah, I just want to start by, thanking everyone for being here. Thank you for having me. This is a really large audience for me, so I'm really like thrilled about that, and all the support and love for this book and the support of my work has meant the world to me. Um, and also, I'm just such a huge fan of librarians. I have been a teacher since basically I was a teenager myself, quite literally. I was 19 when I started out in Montessori, which is shocking to me now. Um, yeah, I didn't feel like a child then, but in hindsight, I'm like, what was I thinking? What was I doing? But I had this incredible relationship with the librarians, the local librarians, and luckily my Montessori school where I taught was right across the street from our library, and we had incredible children's and teen librarians, and um, I just always felt like my curriculum, what I was teaching, was enriched. So I'm just so grateful for the work that you do, and especially in these important times, these troubling times. So keep up the good fight. And with that, I'm going to jump into my talk. I really wanted to talk about discomfort, and I think that came up because uh, after Dorito came out, and maybe I'll start with its premise, just in case you don't know, for anybody who doesn't know. So we have a 16-year-old mestizo boy is our protagonist. His name is Brett, and he's unwilling to face the frightening reality of his mother's terminal cancer diagnosis, his adopted mother. Um, and so he escapes into the comic book stories he pens while also funneling these anxieties into an escalating eating disorder. When his food journal falls into the wrong hands and becomes public knowledge, Brett can no longer hide from the painful truths of his real life narrative. Maybe with the help of those who love him and an intriguing new friend, Mallory, who is a self-proclaimed superfat, um, Brett may just find the strength to face even the most unfathomable loss bravely and face the truth of his eating disorder and overcome that. Um, so when the book, as a debut author, I think you're always nervous. But when the book came out, um, so much glowing positive response, but also people who didn't love the book or, you know, uh, had maybe a negative review about it, oftentimes they were uncomfortable. oh, this was a tough read. Um, I had to walk away from this, or I had to put it down. And your knee-jerk reaction is, oh, have I done something wrong? Or like, did I get it right? Is it was the did I make some mistakes? Or, is it just not a book for them? But those voices in the back of your head, they like stick with you as you're working on your next book. Um, and it was really hard. I found myself like sitting in anxiety and struggling to get through the new manuscript because I was writing something similarly challenging. Um, it appears that's just what I do. I write challenging work. Um, and so I want to introduce you to that work too, this new book that'll be out in, I think, September 15th. That's the current date. We know those things can change. Um, and just to kind of give you the bigger perspective then of what's going on with the totality of my work. So, yeah, this book, we don't actually know what the title is yet. Originally, the title was False Face, the musical, and then it was just False Face. And then it was, well, I don't know, is that impactful enough? We don't know. A lot of people are chiming in. Um, I think it could be False Face, the musical, the novel. Like that should be the whole title. I think that's hilarious. I think it's weird because it's really a mashup of musical tropes and within a novel. And the protagonist, Russell, is struggling because he recognizes like he believes his life is a novel, um, but some part of him wants to break out in song and imagines his life is a musical. So, oh, good. I just needed to hide my thumbnail video, the other hard thing. Okay, now that that's out of the way. Um, so yeah, here is this sort of pitch about that book. Two gay teen boys grapple with the pain of homophobia in their own ways. Russell by trying to pray away his inner music man, and Bert by performing extreme masculinity as the youngest action hero of a secret agency whose mission is to save queer youth in danger. When Russell chooses to undergo conversion therapy and Bert fumbles his rescue attempt, the boys will have to interrogate their beliefs and values if they hope to save each other, ultimately learning that being who you are, not changing who you are, can make any heart sing and any hero soar. Um, so yeah, as you can see, this book is dealing with internalized homophobia and uh, you know, uh, religious trauma. And yeah, so I was like really, I think I started to recognize that there was something meaningful about the discomfort that I feel when I am trying to tell these stories, and maybe that the reader feels when they're trying to work through these stories. And coincidentally, the paperback of Dorito was getting going to come out, and I had been asked to do a little Q&A for the back of the book. And some of you have probably seen this, but I kind of shocked myself. Sometimes you'll get these little assignments from your publisher and you're harried and you're overwhelmed and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to just do this in an hour and you forget about it. And then the paperback came out and I actually looked at that little interview and I was kind of amazed at one of the questions and my answer to it. So the final question was, what do you want readers to remember about your books? And it was sort of like I was in the throes of trying to finish this new manuscript. And then I, get my hands on my paperback and I see my words to myself, which were kind of like uh, just what I needed in this moment when I'm struggling to believe in the book that I'm writing and to know that it's worth writing and to have faith that readers can handle it. So I wrote, I want them to remember that I take big creative swings. I always intend to challenge myself artistically, so while aspects of my style, voice, and values will be ever present, I envision a career where each book is unique from the last. Also, I want readers to remember that while I intend to challenge them, I will always build support into my stories. And we're going to talk more about that in this talk, in fact. I tackle the tough stuff because doing so empowers readers to find their way through the challenges in their own lives. In that way, My work is about hope, not despair. Some refer to the Great Cool Ranch Dorito in the Sky as an issues book because it explores disordered eating, but that label rings narrow to me. The emphasis placed on the obstacles Brett faces rather than on the breadth of his humanity and his capacity for healing and growth. Stories are a safe space where we can envision our lives, our culture, and our society differently. They're a place where we can tinker with our own values and beliefs. But again, that growth can only come if we're a little or a lot uncomfortable. And just as an aside, we're going to talk about one of my idols, Brene Brown, in this talk. And uh, she's, for those who don't know, she is a shame and vulnerability researcher out of University of Houston, I believe, and has become really iconic as she's sort of seen sometimes like packaged as like a self-help guru, but her work is far more scientific, far more grounded than all of that. Um, and I just think anyone who has healing work to do will be helped by Brene Brown. So that's just to frame who she is. But she has a sign. She says she often talks about this. How she, when she was teaching, she had a sign on her office in her office that said, "If you're comfortable, I'm not doing my job." And she's often said things like, "If you're not uncomfortable, you're not learning, and if I'm not uncomfortable, I'm not teaching." Um, so that's a little aside about Brene, but we'll get back to her. Um, so I wrote, again, that growth can only come if we're little or a lot uncomfortable. So I think of Dorito as a human book, a healing book, a learning book, a growing book, a love book, long before I think of it as an issues book. I want readers to know that I have faith in their capacity to navigate tough subjects with me. In this way, my books are an invitation to and a celebration of the incredible transformative power of discomfort. And I was sort of, and as I mentioned, I, banged out that interview, sent it off. Months later, I'd forgotten about it. And it's weird as an author to every once in a while be slapped in the face with the fact that you're actually a good writer. And I was like, oh my gosh, that felt really meaningful. I said something important that I need to pay attention to. Um, that discomfort is transformative, and therefore it's important to me, it's important to my work because I'm trying to make work that helps make the world a better place in my own little way. Okay, so um, we're going to look at some of the uh, wonderfully transformative, uncomfortable things that happen in the Great Cool Ranch Dorito in the Sky. And I'll also at times reference the new book a little bit because it's really right on my mind. I just turned the final draft in like 2 weeks ago. So, um, okay. For those who don't know much about me yet, much of my creative research on both the visual artist side and then as a writer is living in the world of men's issues and masculine performance. And so some of those challenges of being male, performing maleness, suffering in the constraints of performing maleness, uh, overcoming the need to perform and instead seeking authenticity, those themes always make their way into my work. And both novels really, really center those things. So we're going to kind of start there. Let's see, what do I have on my notes here? Okay, so when I first started down this research path, I stumbled upon a book because I was working at a library. In fact, I've never been a librarian, but I did have a stint working at a library, which was wonderful. And I just stumbled upon a book by this author, the psychologist, Dr. Herb Goldberg, and uh, the it wasn't this book; it was the one that came before it. So this is the New Male, and his other book was The Hazards of Being Male, and that was the one I stumbled upon. And I remember looking at these subtitles that are so of the 1970s. How, in other words, in publishing, how do you market um, change for men without threatening their masculinity or their need to remain men in their own minds? Um, so they had these, both books had these silly subtitles, and I just thought, oh, they're going to just be filled with men's rights. They're going to be filled with misogyny, mythopoetic stuff, mythopoetic men's movement stuff. And I was kind of intrigued, just like from, a sociological standpoint, how bad is this going to be? And I was so wrong. And I opened that book, and it had some issues of it was of its time, but primarily it was brilliant. And this man was really advocating for men's liberation. And that is something that is a concept that I'd never experienced or stumbled upon. And that is situated within women's liberation. Because for patriarchy to fall in favor of a more horizontal societal structure, um, men have to be involved in that process. Men have to change. So women were, by and large, embracing the change of women's liberation that was bringing to them the changes it brought in their lives and the positive change. Men, not so much, right? Because of what, the fear of losing power, of course. So anyway, I'm trying not to get too into the weeds with the men's issue stuff, but I was really struck because of my own struggles in sort of accepting myself as a gay man and not feeling less than. I was raised, I was a teenager in the 90s, so that was not a pleasant time to deal with those issues. Um, and so there was a long process for me to really feel comfortable in my own skin. And so I just want to bring up this quote that Goldberg says, "The blueprint for masculinity is a blueprint for self-destruction. It is a process so deeply embedded in the male consciousness, however, that awareness of its course and its end has been lost. The masculine imperative, the pressure and compulsion to perform, to prove himself, to dominate, to live up to the masculine ideal, in short, to be a man, supersedes the instinct to survive." So if, you can imagine if that's the kind of pressure teen boys are under as they're heading into manhood, um, there's a lot of danger involved in that. And of course, anyone who has also gone down this path of discovery knows, there's health outcomes that, masculine, traditional hegemonic masculine performance um, has these negative health outcomes, literal shortening of the lifespan, um, and incredible negative outcomes on the mental health side. Um, so let's see. Um, I wanted to do a little crossover moment here with some of my nonfiction. I don't like to publish nonfiction very often, but I part of my MFA thesis was creative nonfiction. I do have a book in the works. It is about my experience with masculinity and masculinity in general. So it's immersion memoir. Some of it is, my life, and some of it is research based. Some of it is social and cultural criticism. Um, will it ever be published and see the light of day? I'm not sure. It feels like this lifelong work because I never feel like I'm fully there. Like there's always still something else to discover. But I just wanted to give you a little insight into like the headspace I was in when I was going in to write Dorito. And I had just gone back to college to do my undergrad. Um, I had left my Montessori career and my life was in shambles, kind of, but I didn't know why. I was really struggling in my relationships. I had an escalating eating disorder that I didn't know I had, and I'd had for many, many years. So this was a major time of like it was a crisis point or a tipping point. Something was going to have to change, and I was going to have to start recognizing that a change needed to happen. So when I write about that time now, I just want to share with you just a little snippet of, my first experience walking into a therapist's office, which would lead to treatment for my eating disorder, very successful treatment, and me sort of uncovering a lot of repressed trauma that I didn't know was trauma. Because if you'd asked me if I'd experienced trauma at that time, I would have said, well, no, of course not. I had no clue that I had experienced trauma. So Here's where I was in my head from my nonfiction thesis. I just turned 36 the first time I stepped into a therapist's office. Drawn from the University of Nevada, Reno's pool of counselors because it seemed I might succeed more readily with a male therapist, Dr. Johnson, a spookily measured and mild-mannered 40-something who specialized in sports psychology, gestured for me to sit in one of his two armchairs, which were spaced far enough apart to suggest my new acquaintance was someone of import. Dr. Johnson's office was spacious and bright, and featured a saltwater fish tank beneath a window with a view of a thoughtfully restored building dating to the late 19th century. Unlike most therapists at my university in their tiny, windowless offices, Dr. Johnson wasn't an intern. He was the man who supervised interns, the man who stood at the front of the room during meetings and took the especially difficult cases. That I found myself in his office was proof that I was an especially difficult case. As I sloughed my backpack from my shoulders and sank into a chair, this realization that I was deeply, maybe irreparably damaged, tapped against my fragile emotional dam. How had things gotten this bad? How had I ended up here? I began to cry, a behavior that, for reasons I couldn't begin to understand, had become a daily practice. Dr. Johnson passed me a box of tissues and settled across from me. There was no hint of judgment or sympathy in his expression. His handsomeness intimidated almost as effortlessly as his wall of credentials. Here was a man who was, at most, 10 years older than me, but he was attractive and powerful and at ease in his body. Beside him, I felt pathetic. Dr. Johnson waited just long enough for me to grit my teeth and suck in a shuddering breath. Then he spoke. What brings you in today? Though I was sure I would choke on them, I managed to wrestle three impotent words from the place where they'd caught in my throat. I didn't know it at the time, but these words, meager as they were, could have been echoed by countless other men in my position. I don't know. So, I'm at the university. I'm starting treatment through the university's services, which was wonderful. I'm in writing workshops, and I've got this 16-year-old kid in my head who's like, tell my story. And what was interesting about that, we're going to talk a little more about compassion later. People often ask, because I'd been a literary fiction writer for a long time and I hadn't sold any books, but I had been thinking of myself in that vein and working in that vein and paying my dues, right? But the books never felt quite right. And people would ask, like, oh, like what, why YA? Why a teenager? And in hindsight, I realized that if I had a really hard time being compassionate toward myself in treatment. I was beating myself up a lot. And yet, when I applied those same issues that I was dealing with to a teenage boy, I couldn't be anything but compassionate towards him. And somehow, like, I recognized right away if I wrote Brett's story, like helping Brett through those issues was going to help me through them as well, because compassion is such a necessary component to healing. Um, and that does have to come from within, not just from others. So yeah, that gives you quite a lot of context of like why I'm writing both about, men and boys and their issues, um, but like also how and why in that moment that all of these things kind of converge to create this book, um, with a character who was struggling in his masculinity and in various aspects of that performance. Um, and he needed to learn and move past that. So part of that, we're going to kind of get into some of the issues that Brett has. Um, and the word shame comes up, talk about uncomfortable. Uh, shame and other necessary vocabulary words. That's what I'm calling this part of the talk. Um, so I mentioned Brene Brown earlier. I think her work is extraordinary. It's life-changing for me. And also like she's in her podcasts and in her books and other media, she's always introducing her followers, I guess, her fans, to other incredible thinkers who are doing important work in the world as well to make the world a better place and make us have happier lives and healthier lives. Um, and I recognized for me that one aspect of men and that I recognized in myself that was causing a lot of my destruction is that so often we're driven by shame. Like that is the core emotion within us. And we'll talk a little more about why in a minute. But I just want to put this definition out here that Brene Brown gives us. Shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love, belonging, and connection. That is deeply painful. And based on everything I've learned, all of my research about men, I get the sense that more often than not, if you dig deep enough, that is what is driving most decisions in, just life choices and the path men go down so often and how they end up like me at, 36, kind of in a state of a breakdown and hoping to start a new life and go back to school and all those things. But I wasn't hopeless, but things were drastically wrong. Okay. So further into my men's research, one of the wonderful resources I came across was this documentary by Jennifer Siebel Newsom. It's called The Mask You Live In, and it's all about the harm hegemonic masculinity and that performance does to boys and men. Uh, and this documentary features so many incredible names, researchers in child development and psychologists, sociologists. So we're getting all these wonderful perspectives to create a bigger picture here of something that's not right with boys. Um, and one of these psychologists, the director of Centers for Men and Young Men, Dr. William Pollack, stated boys are not encouraged to talk about any kind of pain with anyone else. And when they do talk about pain, fathers particularly, but mothers also, tend to focus more on how to solve the problem or what they're going to do or their actions. So very action based. That sounds very manly to me. The way boys are brought up makes them hide all their natural, vulnerable, and empathetic feelings behind a mask of masculinity. When they're most in pain, they can't reach out and ask for help because they're not allowed to, or there won't be a real boy. They're shamed into this and they're very ashamed to break out of it. So we think about the devastation of what that emotion, shame, really means and what it's doing to us. And it's really, really distressing. Uh, and I want to now kind of look at if boys and especially teen boys are beginning to struggle because that sort of policing of masculinity begins at such a young age. So they're being shaped, they're being conditioned by culture and society. Um, kind of how do we distill that? What is the effect of that, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at as a whole. And that I just like to call it the connection crisis, which is kind of a term that I took away from Dr. Niobe Way's work. And this was another person who's featured in that documentary. And of course, I ended up like really deep diving on so many of these experts. So I went to a lot of their books and, studied their work outside of the documentary as well. Um, but yeah, and this quote was really powerful to me because it shows the difference between the way we socialize girls and femme people and the way we socialize boys or mask people. Boys directly make the link between having friendships and mental health. At 11, 12, 13, 14, boys tell these very passionate stories about other boys and wanting to be friends with them and wanting to share secrets. Starting when they're about 15, 16, 17. So here's our YA novel time. The language shifts. You hear boys talking about the struggles in their friendships, being hurt by other boys, feeling betrayed by other boys, wanting to have intimate friendships, not knowing how to find those friendships. They enter into a culture of masculinity that makes these bizarre equations that male intimacy has to be about sexuality. Any sign of intimacy is going to be perceived as potentially gay. They understand that if you're straight, you have no desire for male intimacy. We don't do that with women. We only do that with men. Um, there's a lot to unpack here in relation to Brett's story in The Great Cool Ranch Dorito in the Sky. and what he's going through. Those of you who've read it, first of all, I forgot to mention when I was reading from that first experience when I walked into therapy, those of you who read it, you'll recognize that my own experience mirrored, or Brett's experience, I should say, mirrored my own and his discomfort around his therapist that first time. Um, so you'll see these intriguing parallels between my actual experiences and Brett's. But then there's stuff that's just purely, fiction because I'm telling a good story or hoping to. Um, and part of that has to do with Brett fighting with his best friend Reed. He feels envious that Reed is getting more attention from girls because Reed has a more traditionally accepted body type. And he also feels jealous that now Reed is getting this attention. Reed is leaving him behind. So there's a lot of these hurt feelings that Dr. Way speaks about happening between these two characters. Um, and Brett is becoming more and more isolated. We also see really clear examples of what doctors John and Julie Gottman call bids for connection. So these two, primarily, their institute deals with marriages and like romantic couplings, but so much of their teachings, relate to any type of relationship. And so the bid for connection is basically anytime we reach out, and that's often in really small ways. We ask someone how their day was, or maybe when, your partner's in the kitchen cooking dinner, you go in to keep them company or you go in to help them. Bids for connection come in all forms. But what happens when we're accepting those bids and turning toward them instead of turning away from them, as the Gottmans would put it, what happens is people consistently, over time, they develop stable, long-lasting relationships, rich in good feelings for one another. They also seem to have easier access to humor, affection, and interest in one another during conflict, a factor that allows them to stay connected emotionally, solve problems, and avoid the downward spiral of negative feelings that destroy relationships. So you can imagine that someone like Brett, who's now suffering with an eating disorder, suffering with fears of his mother passing away, um, and having to live in a whole new environment. He has actually moved in with Reed and his dad because his mother is so ill. So he's, moved into this what really is his family, but he's not fully accepting them in that way yet. Bits for Connection would go a long way with him. So I just want to read you a couple examples of how that plays out in the book and how Brett turns away from them primarily at first. So at one point, Reed had, with kind of unwittingly, in the heat of a moment, he made a comment about Brett's weight because Brett has been slowly gaining weight. Um, and it really, really distressed Brett. But of course, because of the shame we talked about, Brett can't talk about that and he can't acknowledge it. So they're lying in their bunks because they share a bedroom. Brett's on top, Reed's on the bottom bunk. Reed shifts beneath me. His voice comes hesitant. Hey, Brett, you still awake? Yeah. I'm sorry about the fence thing, what I said. It was a dick thing to say, and I didn't mean it. I was just freaking out, afraid we were going to get expelled. And then a little exposition happens and it goes on, and Brett finally says, It's chill, man. I get it. Tense situation and all. And then Reed says, It doesn't matter how you look. You're my best bro and you're my brother, so my words spill out before I have a chance to edit them. Miss Finch gave me a food journal this week. She wants me to write down everything I eat because she thinks I might be eating wrong. Um, I can't say the next part. I can't say what Reed must be thinking. My eyes fill. The jawbreaker lodges deeper in my throat. I let the silence lodge deeper too, afraid if I try to speak, the words will get caught on the way out. Um, so here we see Brett resisting and eventually turning toward that bid for connection to, at least for the first time ever, allude to the issues he's having with food. Um, as those issues escalate, though, uh, and that causes more tension in the relationship between these two friends, these two best friends. So uh, later on, Brett is suffering again, and Reed tries again to get him to open up in ways that he doesn't want to. Reed says, "We can talk about it if you want. You can talk to me. All I want to do is say yes." I say, "It was just a bad dream." Reed's voice isn't as cavalier as I'm used to. "Would you just talk to me? You're shutting me out, and it feels like shit. I'm your brother. I'll always be your brother." This is the closest Reed has ever come to punching me in the gut. Bunch of exposition with a flashback moment. And then back in the moment, current moment, Brett saying to the reader, "Reed means what he says when he allows me my brother, but that doesn't make his words true, at least not outside the metaphorical sense that will one day see us from stardust to stardust. I try to say, I want to talk about Evelyn." That's his mother. "Can we talk about Evelyn?" I try to say, "I don't know how to fix this food thing." I try to say I'm ashamed, but I choke on the words. "I'm good, really. Let's go back to sleep, okay?" And then Reed says, his voice taking on an edge, "No, actually, it's not okay. I was there when I know more than you think I do. There's no point in hiding from me anymore." And this conversation goes on just a few more beats, turning into an actual fight where Brett, storms off and there's, some FU bros thrown around. Um, so I really wanted to illustrate just this struggle that boys can have in simply stating plainly what they're really feeling at any given time. And also this kind of push and pull within a relationship, within a friendship, and as someone learns and grows, to see some of the positive change. How does a character, how does a boy get to the point where he can be vulnerable? So let's move a little further into that. More vocabulary words. Um, Speaking of Brene Brown, because I'm always speaking of her, uh, she says that uh, this something along this line. I'm butchering it, but the scope of our world is the scope of our vocabulary, or our language, or the boundaries of our world, or the boundaries of our language. So I think I so in writers' workshops, you get a lot of feedback about like, "Oh, you showed it. You don't need to tell us." I put words on the page like embarrassed, ashamed, frightened, and people are like, "No, you showed it. You don't need to do that." But I know that I do need to, because I'm trying to do something a little different than just tell a good story or be the best writer I can be in that moment. I'm trying to really normalize granularity around emotion words and actually spend the time on the page to use that language. So when I come to throughout this presentation, there's so many words, so many definitions that come up. And those are things that actually end up on the page in the book, because the character needs to get to the point where he can say those things and he can recognize them when he feels them, rather than just "I'm mad" or "I'm angry," which of course is the only emotion he's really allowed to feel while maintaining his manhood. Um, so building trust can create vulnerability. And I like to put characters in the story I call wall scalers. Like, you put up your walls around yourself, but who can get past those walls? And Reed, well, even though Brett hasn't allowed him past the walls very much, as the book goes on, that shifts, that changes. Brett's able to come out because Reed is a wall scaler. Reed keeps trying. Reed is persistent and patient with Brett, and also because of other characters like Mallory. Um, And Mallory comes in and really changes Brett's worldview in a lot of ways. And just the fact that she is a fat person, she's a girl, she's, kind of a new revelation for him, something he is not terribly familiar with. And that allows him to begin to open up about the issues he's having. So, um, vulnerability is based on mutuality and requires boundaries and trust. It's not oversharing, it's not purging, it's not indiscriminate disclosure, and it's not celebrity style social media information dumps. Vulnerability is about sharing our feelings and experiences with people who have earned the right to hear them. Being vulnerable and open is mutual and an integral part of the trust building process. And trust, Brene Brown talks about how that she has a metaphor about a marble jar where like trust is built one marble into the jar at a time. So she's talking about her daughter, like the daughter's friend that she trusts, like saves a spot for her at lunch, or says good morning to her on the bus, or like whatever. It's these little things in our lives. Every little marble is how we end up with that full jar, and we trust people. And so people like Mallory coming in, Mallory has several marble moments where Brett is learning to trust her. And eventually that spills over into others. Uh, you know, Reed and his therapist, and pretty soon he's writing about his issues in his English class, and opening up. And all of that actually mirrors my own path in a lot of ways, where there were aspects of my suffering, and especially around the eating disorder, that I couldn't even talk about. Um, and then before I knew it, I was writing a whole book about it, and now I'm kind of like, here I am, the poster boy of one of these issues. Um, so that became really important in Brett's story, and I think it's important in anybody's healing journey. Is how do you find, like, where are your wall scalers? Okay, so there's all kinds of lessons Brett needs to learn, and some of these I may talk about the new book as well. We'll see. Uh, Love is really important as a theme in my work, and and particularly for men, for boys, being able to recognize and exercise all the love around us, especially that's not necessarily romantic love that we think of that you might get from a woman. Um, and I also talk about these characters. I often put these characters in my work that I call growth guides. Um, and these are people who have more experience and knowledge and answers that can help that young protagonist learn the things he needs to learn. Um, it's really hard to get what you need, all of what you need from your peers, even though it seems cool, the idea that like the teenagers just handle everything while just in so much of a young adult media, right? It's like the parents sit around and do nothing, they're worthless. The adults are worthless, so they're all dead in the town for some reason. And the kids all have to save the day. Those are fun stories. I love those. But I'm trying to ground my work in a reality around how does this child learn the lessons he needs to. So growth guides, like his teacher, those of you who read the book, he has an English teacher who he's able to open up to. The teacher recognizes some issues that Brett's having around race and ethnicity, and is giving him guidance there. In my new book, I have a character who is not who he seems. He seems like a bad guy at first, perhaps, but he starts to kind of show, as we get to know him, he's got some really good wisdom for the character, and eventually we'll realize like, oh, he's a much better person than we initially thought. Um, and that had to do with religion and the conversion therapy stuff. Um, I needed this mentor person to go beyond God and the Bible, uh, because that's not enough for me. And this character who's having a crisis of faith, it's not enough for him. So I thought, well, who do I admire? Well, I love bell hooks, and so um, this character, this growth guide character, is also obsessed with bell hooks, and now I trust him. I invented the guy, and I was like, I don't know if I trust him. And then he's like spouting bell hooks, and I'm like, Now, all right, I trust you, dude. And I know that Russell, that protagonist, is safe in his hands. Um, so uh, Probably doesn't need an introduction. Social critic and theorist, brilliant, wonderful woman. I love all of her work. The existence of visionary male teachers who offer males and females spiritual guidance is a constant reminder to us that the hearts of men are transformed by love and compassion. So yeah, there's something about in her book about men and masculinity. There's always hope, and she sees that in those kind of guides, which she's writing about men in this book, which is why she put it that way, visionary male teachers. But of course, she means anyone outside of this context. Um, One of my other favorite books of hers, all about love. She writes, learning faulty definitions of love when we are quite young makes it difficult to be loving as we grow older. And so in this new book, this character, Russell, he did not have the kind of love he needed in his family. He was not loved for who he was, or he is not loved for who he was, and that is causing an incredible crisis of his identity and leading him down this path of trying to change who he is. Um, and so, learning to accept himself is part of the story, but another part of the story is like, well, okay, how do I learn to love if I haven't had models of it? So, yeah, other characters like the wall. I want to say wall crawler. I made up this term and I'm already forgetting it. Wall scalers, the wall scaler or the growth guides. He's got plenty of those, which hopefully you'll enjoy when that book comes out. Um, Other important lessons, and I'll try to be kind of quick here at the end because I have just a few more to get through that are really helpful in any healing journey, not just for masculinity. But Dr. Edith Eger, I'm really obsessed with her work. She's a Holocaust survivor and psychologist, and she teaches us about the difference between guilt and remorse, which is something that Brett's English teacher teaches him about. Because Brett is really suffering. He's made all these mistakes, but he's trying to fix it, and he wants to fix his friendship with Reed after they've had a big fight. Um, and he's hoping to be forgiven, but he doesn't know if he's worth, forgiving. Um, and yeah, I just think Brett needed to learn what Edith Eger taught me, which is it's important to separate guilt from remorse. Remorse is an appropriate response to a harmful mistake we've made. It's more akin to grief. It means accepting that the past is the past, that it can't be undone, and allowing yourself to feel sad about it. I can feel remorse and recognize that all I've been through, all the choices I made have brought me to today. Remorse is in the present and it can coexist with forgiveness and freedom. So while our guilt holds us down and chains us and makes us think that we're not good and, and valuable and worthy of love, remorse is different. Remorse is more like, if I knew now if I knew then what I know now, I would have made a different choice. So that helps us to develop our value system and continually become better people. Um, I've been obsessed with Desmond Tutu my entire adult life. I first discovered him and his work when I very first started teaching Montessori, so 25 years at this point ago. And when I would create curriculums around peace education, I always was linking peacemakers in the world that we wanted to learn about with like thematic content. So to me, Desmond Tutu is the peacemaker of forgiveness. That's his shtick, or was, when he was alive. He was the leader of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission after the fall of apartheid. And he writes about how, when we seek forgiveness and atone, um, we can actually heal our bonds rather than punishing those who have done wrong. So his work is really powerful. And that was bolstering to Brett when he's trying to repair things with his best friend. Um, Identity, exploring our identities and honoring them matters a lot too. I'm a mestizo. My characters are often mestizo. And Brett, he started to gain more self-confidence when he started to understand that part of his identity. He had been adopted by a white woman, and so he was disconnected from Mexican culture. And as he started to explore that on his own, um, thanks to these growth guides who introduced him to Gloria Anzaldua's work, he is having these wonderful revelations about himself that help to bolster his self-esteem. And when he's comparing himself to Reed, he's starting to recognize there's a reason I'm sitting here thinking this white boy is better looking than me, or, people like him more than me, or whatever. There are these systems at play, and it's worth learning about those things, even at a young age. Of course, I didn't discover Ansel Dua till college. Um, but when I did, she like blew my mind wide open, and really helped me understand my aspects of myself for the very first time. Okay, and then the last thing, big healing thing I want to talk about, all of which is somewhat uncomfortable, storytelling and art making, the healing power of creativity. So this is a book by Dr. Angus Fletcher. I'm obsessed with this book. It's a brain research about storytelling and how that works and affects us. um, and he talks about one thing of many he talks about is autobiographical review. And like, he's talking about the plays you would see put on in like Greek tragedy. If we imaginatively, oh, okay, I should frame this. Often that those were dealing with great traumas like war, right? That people might actually have experienced. So what was the benefit then of creating a play about that? In other words, why would you want to dwell on it? But he says if we imaginatively play back our experience of trauma within a safe and supportive environment, then the flashbulb intensity of our remembrance will gradually decrease. This isn't the same thing as erasing our memory. The trauma will remain part of our lived experience, kept within the long term storage of our neural cortex. But autobiographical review can make the memory less emotionally raw and intrusive, receding the trauma into the background of our consciousness and decreasing our symptoms of helplessness, isolation, and hypervigilance. My goodness, a lot to unpack there. And I'll try to do it as briefly as I can. But like for me, the real human here, the author, that's what my artist practice and what my novels are doing for me and have done for me. Um, it gives me a sense of taking some, horrible trauma, something that had plagued me or harmed me for years, and gives me a sense of control over it and gives me a way to process it and become empowered and a way to help others, which is super empowering. Um, and I find every time I work through certain subject matter, like so in Dorito, that has to do with the, disordered eating. In this new book that has to do with sexual trauma and religious trauma. Um, Whatever I might have been holding on to that was weighing me down isn't anymore, right? I'm able to transcend that. Um, and it always stays with me, but it doesn't hurt me the way that it once did. And then when we look within the stories, just in Dorito, for example, those who are familiar, you'll see Mallory is this printmaker who's using her artist practice to celebrate her body and her femininity. And Brett is this comic book artist who is using his stories to avoid dealing with his trauma, to like run away from it and to give it instead to his superhero character protagonist. Because if Kid Condor is the one dealing with all the problems, then maybe Brett doesn't have to. Maybe he doesn't have to feel it. But through working with Mallory, and becoming, befriended by her and mentored by her, he is able to get to the end. By the end, his new edition of his comic book, he's writing a super fat superhero character. Um, so he's really starting to become comfortable with who he is and his body, but also recognizing, wait a minute, the world is bigger than me. When you're in trauma, you're deeply entrenched in yourself. It's a very selfish time. But being able to start to look outward, right? And how can I use my artist practice to not just help myself to process, but to help others? So yeah, I think that's a really powerful uh, thing to end on there. So I'm gonna stop my share and Let's see.
Yeah. So
Okay. Good.
we had one question come in into the Q&A, and I'm going to verbally invite anyone who has any other questions to drop them in the Q&A also. But early on in the talk, someone asked about your nonfiction piece, and is that going to be aimed towards YA? They said they're really looking forward to adding a book like that to their collection.
Yeah, this is a tricky one for me. Initially, I was writing it for an adult audience, just like everything else that I've been working on. And then Dorito happened. I really embraced YA. I was like, dude, you were born for YA. You're a teacher. What were you thinking? You have always been this. So part of the struggle of that book, this nonfiction book, is like, okay, I think I do want it to be for a YA audience. I think there's, yeah, definitely a hole in the marketplace there. And then, okay, what do I need to do to make that happen? And how do I often say in nonfiction it's tricky. And when I'm teaching it, I always say this. Sometimes you have to live the ending, and sometimes you haven't lived the ending yet. And and I don't know for sure if I fully lived the ending of that book, even though my nonfiction mentor, the incredible Jessica Henry Nelson, I just need to shout her out at VCU. Wonderful, wonderful woman. Thank God for her. She's like, "Oh yeah, you got this. You just have to like buckle down. So we'll see. But anyway, that's the typically long-winded way to say, yeah, I do think it's gonna be in the YA realm. And just knowing people want it makes me more motivated. So thank you.
Well, I was saying, there you go. That it was right there. And we got someone else who said they love the Tucson setting. And they spent the last 30 years teaching and living there. Did you live there because you really nailed the desert life?
Oh yeah. So it is my favorite city in the world. It was my first city that was my city. It was my own. So I grew up in Northern Nevada. But when I don't know, like very late 20s, um, my best friend, so my Reed, in fact, he was moving down there to go to the U of A. And I had left my teaching job in Nevada, and I was kind of in between things. And a Montessori teacher, you can go anywhere. And I was just like, I'm gonna totally like tag along with my best bud. Um, and I did, and I got a job at Calsa Montessori. Since we're talking to a Tucsonan, they'll probably know that name and up in the Catalina foothills. And it was a wonderful, like transformative, like time of my life, a lot of growth, a lot of mistakes. A lot of the mistakes that are infused into this story are like based on me being the hot, messy version of myself during my years in Tucson. But eventually I left Tucson to go back to college at the University of Nevada. But I tell you, I would move to Tucson right now if it were the right time, the right place, the right job. If I could teach at the U of A, I mean, I just love it. It's a beautiful, like, just vibrant city and so wonderfully diverse.
I love that. I also tagged along. My cousin called me one day and was like, "Do you want to come move to Ohio?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And just like
Yeah.
that period of life where you can just do things like that. And sure enough, I moved to Ohio for a year. It was also a hot mess, but that's where I started library school. And like, here we are over a
Yeah.
decade later. It's so interesting how that happens.
I think about that all the time that like there might be a version of Dorito without Tucson, but like this my favorite piece of art I've ever made, this book, like it relies on it in some ways. Like, thank Christ that that happened. And
Hmm.
I don't know why I say I'm not even religious, and that came out of me twice in this talk. Thank God.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
Words. Yeah, no, I just I feel that so hard. We got someone else. It's not a question, but sort of a comment. Thank you for sharing everything you did. It was very inspiring and healing to hear you speak today, to say the least. And I want to agree. While you were talking, I pulled out my phone and texted my friends, and I was like, I just want to tell you that I love you guys so much. I'm listening to this talk and drink water. Just
I'm
because
so
that's
glad.
I absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. And we have another question. How do you take care of yourself when writing such deeply personal stories?
Oh wow, yeah. I mean, I was so lucky while writing Dorito because I was like literally the book. I wrote it kind of over about 3 years while I was doing my BA and BFA, and all that time, pretty much, I was working with my treatment team at the university. I was very lucky. I mean, and I really need to acknowledge that because treatment is hard to access and very expensive without insurance, obviously. But because of the situation I was in as a university student, I could access those services and they could work with me as long as they felt they needed to between doctor, dietitian, and therapist. And so the care was built in because I'd be like writing something and like bursting into tears and be like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way when I'm writing this scene or whatever. Like I know Brett's sad right now, but what's coming on in me? What's coming up in me? And then it's like, but that's okay because tomorrow I'll see my therapist. You know what I mean? Or I have an appointment with my doctor, and I can talk to her because she's kind of a therapist too. Um, so anyway, uh, that was lucky. And now, I think I actually do think writing my new book was a little harder because I was doing it without those kind of services. And I was having to take some breaks, and just, and really just allow myself the time it takes and to come back to it when I'm ready. For instance, the one part of the book where I got really stuck was when he first goes to conversion therapy, and I was just terrified of not getting it right. And I knew all the emotions around this because I had lived them years ago and I'd moved past them, but I'm dredging them up and I'm trying to have new insights about that. And I'm trying to do my job as an author. And, so it was overwhelming. But again, when I think about those types of characters I put in the books, like, the wall, scalers, the growth. I just made these terms. I don't remember what I said. The growth guides. I have those in my life still. And so I do turn to them and I have a lot of them. And all that healing work I did that was around issues of masculinity, I don't have that loneliness problem anymore. My life is so full of people who love me, and who I can just reach out to and be super vulnerable with and just be like, I need to just sit on your couch and cry about this thing. And they'll be like, oh my God, cool, because I would like to just sit here on the couch and cry about something when you're done.
Yeah. Yes.
Um,
You first,
so
me
I,
second. Yeah.
yeah, so in a way, like all that prep work I was doing on myself as I wrote Dorito was preparing me to be on my own without more like professional services. But I will also say that there did come one point, and it didn't really have to do with the story of False Face, but just the process. And I'm doing my MFA at that time now, and I'm really stressed. I got another thesis to do. And I went and sought services again, and I didn't need them for a long period of time, just a little bit to get through a difficult, moment. And I really, really advocate for that. Like know yourself and know when you need to seek help, and also know when something isn't right for you. So for me in my heart, I know that I was ready to write these books even when they were hard. I also know that they may not be for every reader, and I'm totally okay with that because a reader also knows themselves.
When the right time is for something. I think we've all
Right.
been there where we've opened a book and got to a point and realized like now is not the moment. I will come back later.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then we have sort of another fun thing to share. Did you know that your book is on the 2026 Rhode Island Teen Book Awards nominee list? And so many of their teen patrons read your book for the summer, this past summer that we just left. So look at
I love that. Thank you so much. And I may have known there came a point because you're trying not to be too gross about Googling yourself. But there did come,
that.
yeah, there came a point where it's like, oh, there's like, oh, cool, there's like a lot of there's a lot of state lists. The bigger awards, you're like always aware of those, of course. But yeah, it means the world that like I thought again, I wrote this little difficult literary kind of book and a literary book that's going out in a genre, in a category, marketing category that does not appreciate literary very much. It's harder to sell. And I just thought, thank Christ, I just like got a book out in the world. That's so amazing. Um, so to have had this response, right? Like it's not just being read by seven people. That blows my mind.
Yes.
So thanks to everybody for all the support.
Yeah, there are more than seven people here right now.
Yeah.
Um, so then we have another one. Have you seen any responses from teens reading Doritos? And were you surprised by any of their reactions?
Yeah, one of my favorite moments was at Tucson Festival of Books. I was interviewed, and you can actually listen to this interview. It's on YouTube. So and I forget what it's called, but it's easy to find. Just look me up in Tucson Festival of Books. And I was interviewed by a group of teens who had, read the book, and I was blown away by the depth of their questions. I had done so many interviews by that point, and there's the questions you kind of always expect, and then there's some kind of like, oh, this interviewer is paying more attention. Um, and then there were these teens, and every question was a challenge to me, and they just went so deep. So I was so grateful for that because I have always said this is the Montessorian in me. Like, if you have faith that young people can rise to the occasion, they will. And when I became an author then for young people, I carried that with me when the naysayers were like, you can't write about this. It's too much. It's too dark. It's too, all the things. I just had to keep saying, I know young people and I know what they're capable of. And so then, I had that. That was one of the first moments where I was really in the real world with the desired audience, and they were so plugged in and they were so intuitive. They picked up on so many of the nuances, and that meant the world. And then also just that little bit of validation that, like, I'm not afraid to be the now 43-year-old who's like out of touch. My job isn't to pander to young people, and my job isn't to like emulate exactly what a teenager looks like in this moment. My job is to create characters who are real and authentic and are truly themselves. And that is what's going to resonate over time. And so the fact that, the book was resonating, it was like, okay, good. That's such a relief that like even if that isn't the most important thing, the teens didn't seem to feel at all like, oh well, this book doesn't this isn't a teenager today. This is some old guy writing for teens, which
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, yeah. But like I like to say, we were all teens once. Like unless someone's got something really important to tell the world, we were
Yeah.
all there. And as an adult who reads YA for my job and for joy, sometimes I feel like it heals a little something in teen Kim, like something that didn't exist
Yes.
in the 90s and the early
Hmm.
00s. And now it does, and you read it and it's really healing. So like, you were a
And
teen
there's
once too.
lots of value in that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And those
yeah.
themes, coming of age and all those themes, all of that, there's some amount of universality to that
Mhm.
that we can like cling on to when we're writing stories for literally a different generation.
And so sort of building on the previous question, this person said they really appreciated your focus on deconstructing masculinity for readers. And have you heard from young male identifying readers who received that message?
Yes, not a lot.
Mhm.
And that kind of doesn't surprise me. My nephew is 17, and the idea of him, like, I'm trying to imagine him like reaching out to an author and being like, oh, I really loved your book, whatever. Like, I can't even imagine that. I feel like he's very much the type of character I'm writing where he would be like, this means a lot to me, but I'm holding it in, right?
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, one of my friends in my grad program, her son read it. And so I got to have a really good conversation with him. And he's like, I couldn't put it down. And I really resonated with his character. I just liked his voice and I laughed a lot. And, so he was just like, I felt like I didn't expect to connect with someone that young. He was 14. Um, but I thought, okay, cool. That's a really good response. And then I do get the occasional letter. And a lot of times it's from queer boys. They tend to be a little, they're obviously further along in this journey because when masculinity is already rejecting you, you start to self-select out, especially nowadays. We might have struggled more back in the 90s like I did, but like now you have an incredible network of support in queer communities that are easy, not always, but often easy to access. So I feel like those ones are the ones who aren't afraid to kind of be really like enthusiastic. And um, what I will admit, and maybe I just don't go to enough conferences yet. Like I'm a year or so in. Um, because yeah, I would like to meet more teens. And the thing my heart desires most is for someone to be like, yeah, I don't want to. subscribe to diet culture anymore. And, I want my body to, I want a liberated body as well. Um, so that would be the thing I want most. But what I get most from boys and men, and this means a lot to me, is this relationship between Reed and Brett. People are like, men are always like, and boys too, like, oh, I have a Reed, or I want to read in my life. And I'm like, okay, that is really powerful to me. And I hope this book helps you get one step closer to getting that Reed in your life. Um, and if you have the Reed, I hope you reach out and give them a hug
Yes, and tell them to drink water.
and drink water.
Yes, it's really important. Are there other novels for YA or middle grade that you would recommend that address these topics of masculinity, identity, or model healthy mask behaviors?
Oh my gosh. Interestingly enough,
Oh, go ahead, open your story graph. That's what I would immediately do. Start the scroll.
yeah, no, I'm literally going to my photos because I just got the graphic for my one of my panels at NCTE next week. So the incredible Jennifer Lagarde, I'm sure most of you know who she is. She interviewed me for her podcast a while back, and I don't think that's even come out. But she invited me to be on this panel, Boys Will Be Boys, reading, centering, and celebrating books that reinforce healthy depictions of masculinity. And so on this panel, we see Federico Ribia, we see Rex Ogle and John Shue and Jeff Zentner. Um, so those are a few names, and some of them I've read and some I haven't. I think Randy Ribe, I think I'm saying it
Mm-hmm,
wrong,
mm-hmm.
right? Ribe,
I think
Randy Ribe,
Ribe. I don't know
Ribe.
either. We know who you're
Yeah,
talking about.
and I should know I've met him and he's a real delight to just be with in person. What a cool guy. I love his work as well, in that realm. Um, so yeah, those are some names to think about. And you know, and there's not a lot of names that immediately come to mind for me because I don't feel like enough of that is happening in publishing for young people. I think when I think of boy books, I think a lot of times they do have to do with the challenges of being a boy, but a lot of times those are in ways that perpetuate that sort of patriarchal hegemonic masculinity. How do you like how do you win the big game or whatever? How do you win the girl? Instead of like pushing back against that. So I'm still looking for other people who inspire me that way too.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are a little over our time, and I know it's very early where you are. So thank you for everyone who sent questions. Thank you so much for being here. And someone had mentioned sort of pulling back the curtain for your writing process. I know my TBR just got a whole lot longer because I want to read all of these books that you listed. And thank you, everyone who joined us this morning. We hope you have a really great rest of your Teen Summit. Christy has dropped the next sessions, the schedule link. But really, thank you so much, Josh, for taking a moment to speak with us, to talk about things that are deeply personal. And I know so much of us appreciated hearing. I certainly did. So thank you for your time this morning. And I hope you have a really great rest of your day and weekend.
Okay, you too. Thank you all so very much. And I'm truly grateful for all the support. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right, thank you everyone. So we are going on a break. You can use the link to the schedule to access the Zoom link for track 1 and track 2. It is the same Zoom link for everything under that row. Enjoy your break and we will see you all soon.